Welcome, Sens Talk.
He scores! He bats it in! Tim Stutzler wins it for Ottawa! Triple Grant is going to put the finishing touches on an Ottawa win. See you later. Go Sens, go!
Welcome to Sens Talk. My name is Brandon Plant, and I am your host. Today, we have some breaking news coming out of the nation's capital as Steady Steve Staios takes a swing. Now, before we break down today's massive blockbuster trade, I want to say thank you to all of you for nominating us for 4 different awards at this year's 2025 Ottawa Faces Magazine Awards. We're up for Best YouTuber, Best Blog, Best Sports Podcast, and Best Sports Reporter/Personality. That's under my name, Brandon Plant. If you want to vote for us, you can vote for us at facesottawa.ca/awards. That's facesottawa.ca/awards up until March 14th. So a week away. You can vote for all 4 nominations once a day up until March 14th. Again, looking to defend our title for Best YouTube Channel in Ottawa, making it 3 years in a row potentially. Looking to defend our title for Best Blog as well, looking to make that back-to-back. And as well looking to add some to our resume with the Sports Podcast and Reporter. So again, facesottawa.ca/awards. Your support and nominations mean the world to me. But you know what? Once you're nominated, you might as well win this thing. So again, appreciate your nominations. Now let's win this thing. Now, speaking of winning this thing, I think there's going to be a lot of debate on who won this trade today between the Ottawa Senators and the Buffalo Sabres. My initial thoughts, I thought Buffalo was winning this trade. My thoughts after giving it some thought and actually digging into this trade, I think this deal has the potential to work out for both teams, but I do like it on paper for the Ottawa Senators right now. So with that, what's the trade, you're probably wondering, if you didn't see the thumbnail and the title and Twitter and everywhere else? Well, you might be living under a rock, but let me tell you, the trade is as follows. And honestly, it's an emotional day to be a Sens fan, and especially to be in that locker room because of who was dealt. As the Ottawa Senators today traded, oh man, the Noof, Josh Norris, is gone. He's off to Buffalo with friend of the show, Jacob Bernard-Docker. Man, what a rough day. We lose the Noof and a friend of the show in Jacob Bernard-Docker to the Buffalo Sabres in trade for Dylan Cozens, Dennis Gilbert, and a 2026 second-round pick, which might end up being basically like another first-round pick, like a late first-rounder, if Buffalo continues to be not good and miss the playoffs again next year for a 15th year in a row, which is obviously very possible. That pick has potential to be a top 40 pick. So a very, very high value pick, which Ottawa desperately needs right now because 1, they can flip it to get another piece today, and 2, to restore the cupboard. I mean, Ottawa's prospect pool is very barren right now. On the note about flipping the second round pick, before I kind of get into the trade, Ottawa right now is roughly around $2 million in cap space with this move and Cozens still on the LTIR. So Ottawa does have some money to make it work. They have some picks to make it work. I'm going to check my phone here before I get into the video. Whoa, Mikko Rantanen traded to Dallas for 2 seconds and Stankoven. Wow, that's a great trade there for Carolina. They turned beans into like a whole farm basically with that one. I thought they were going to get screwed just a few hours ago when Rantanen looked to be getting dealt for basically nothing, right, to Carolina. But anyways, what a move that is. But Ottawa hasn't made another move. We'll see if they make another move. Of course, I'll keep you updated here on youtube.com/SensTalk if that happens. But here are my initial thoughts on the Dylan Cozens for Josh Norris trade. It is obviously tough to lose a player like Josh Norris, who's been part of this rebuild since literally the beginning. Remember, he was part of the Erik Karlsson trade. This is an OG piece of the rebuild. This is a Brady Tkachuk best friend. This is one of the faces of the franchise that was seen as one of the guys that are going to help bring the Stanley Cup back to the nation's capital for the first time since 1927. If you remember that famous Hockey News magazine, here, let me grab it for you, 1 sec. All right, it took me a couple minutes to find it, but yeah, do you remember this? Oh, what could have been, and I still have it in the plastic. I guess it makes sense. Actually, probably a good call. Now this is really worth something because it's a nostalgic piece, I guess. But yeah, that was supposed to be the Big Four, and it was for some time, but I guess it's over. And all good things have to come to an end, I suppose. But yeah, no, I just remember that in the moment there and had to grab it because, again, that kind of just puts things into perspective, right? Where that was an article. This was a magazine from 2021, I believe, right? Yeah, 2021, May of 2021. So he's been here forever. You know, he's been an Ottawa Senator forever. So no doubt it's a tough Tough day for the Sens organization and its fan base. But with this trade, yes, you're losing an integral piece to the core like a Josh Norris, but you're gaining an integral piece to the core in a Dylan Cozens for the short and long term. On top of that, you're shedding roughly $1 million of salary, so you're getting younger. You're getting a little bit less for roughly the same impact. Well, most of all, Cozens, I think, is going to fit in very nicely to the Ottawa Senators system. He plays a very heavy game. And speaking of heavy, in this trade, Ottawa also gets some grit on the defensive side of things on the blue line, which is something we definitely needed. Ottawa, we've seen over the last week in reports, desperately was looking for a guy that could step up and do the fighting and the grittiness and the physicality to take that pressure off of Brady Tkachuk, which I don't really know how to feel about that narrative. I think Tkachuk's going to fight if he wants to fight anyways, to be honest with you. You can't stop a guy like that from fighting if he feels like it. He's literally 1 in a million because of that fact right there, that he will fight and knock anyone out whenever he feels like it. But again, it's good to bring in a guy like that is going to be able to take that role off of Tkachuk's shoulders where he won't always have to be that guy. So there is that. And we'll talk about Gilbert later in the video. Fine defenseman, basically a swap with JBD, another depth defenseman. But also on top of that, you're, as I already said, getting a high-valued second-round pick. So this is a bit of a savvy move for Sens GM Steve Stais, to be honest with you. Initially, I was not a fan. I really wanted a JJ Peterka. I definitely wanted a Jack Quinn potentially in a Dylan Cozens trade. I do realize that probably would be a little bit too much, especially considering the fact that the Buffalo Sabres weren't really inclined on giving up roster players without getting roster players back. So that's fair. But again, at the same time, but ultimately why, when the trade was first announced, I was skeptical and still, to be fair, remain a little nervous and skeptical, is purely because you're swapping 2 second-line centers. And, doing that mid-season, this is more of an off-season move. Doing that mid-season has effects, of course, on the ice. Again, we'll talk about it in a second here. I think Cozens will fit in nicely. Not really worried about the impact this will have for the team on the ice. I think Cozens is actually going to do very well here in Ottawa. There's a lot of reasons that point for that being the case. But off the ice, Tkachuk literally was interviewed as I was recording this video, and he was emotional. He was basically crying. Understandably so. Your best friend was just dealt. It's obviously an emotional time for him and the guys in that room. So how do they respond in that aspect from this trade? Does this shake up the core in a way that has a negative consequence? That is why I remain skeptical about the trade. Not that I don't like Dylan Cozens as a player, because I do like the player. I am very skeptical about the timing of the trade, though, especially mid-year. But no one can dispute the fact that this certainly is a wake-up call for the core and a bit of a kick in the ass as well, right? Like, hey, no one's off limits here. No matter when the time is, you could be dealt if you're not performing to your capabilities, to your contract, or if you have a good trade out there. So this is certainly a wake-up call. Hopefully the way they respond is with a fire lit under them, right? And with a guy like Cozens, I think that's definitely possible. And the last thing I'll mention before I break down Dylan Cozens, Josh Norris, Dennis Gilbert, and friend of the show, Jacob Bernard Docker. Each of those players, to talk about them individually, to kind of give you an analysis on each of them. Again, I'm sure there's Buffalo fans watching this. The last thing I will say is the main thing about this is Cozens doesn't really have that injury history, while Josh Norris has had multiple shoulder injuries. So, when he's healthy, Josh Norris, a hell of a player. The key word is when. And quite often, it's not been the case that he's been healthy. Now, let's get into the player profile, shall we? So first off, we got Dylan Cozens, the workhorse from Whitehorse. Welcome to Ottawa, the nation's capital. Dylan Cozens is a 6'3", 194-pound, 24-year-old center who shoots right, which is very interesting. He has 5 years left, which is up until 2030, at $7.1 million per season. This year, in 61 games with the Buffalo Sabres, Cozens has 31 points, 11 goals in those 61 games, averaging just over 17 minutes of ice time with a Corsi for percentage, which means more often than not when he's on the ice, he and his line have possession of the puck at above 50%, nearly at 51%. In his NHL career, Cozens has played in 341 NHL games, scoring 77 goals and 197 total points. He also has 375 hits, so basically averaging a hit per game. This year, my goodness, he's averaging just over 2 hits per game, 148 in those 61 games. Cozens is exactly what you just heard, a very heavy hitting, physical, play-driving center. And that's what you want on the Ottawa Senators. You know, we need more guys that can play that physical, nose to the grindstone type of style. Josh Norris, as we'll talk about later on in this video, is a fantastic player in his own right, but he's more one-dimensional, while Dylan Cozens brings a lot more of a play-driving element to his game. Dylan Cozens, and this is courtesy of Hockey Reference and Everyday Sens. Some of these stats I didn't even notice when I was checking Hockey Reference, so shout out to EDS for this. Dylan Cozens has 25 5v5 points this year. That would rank second on the Senators, only behind Tim Stützle. Now, we all know the Ottawa Senators are struggling to score on the 5-on-5. They're 30th in the National Hockey League for 5-on-5 goals. The next Senator player has 20 5-on-5 points, by the way. So Dylan Cozens right away steps in and fills a necessary void and need that the Ottawa Senators desperately needed to figure out. And Cozens can certainly be the answer to that problem. Again, the power play, I don't think any of us are concerned about the power play finding a way to score with the talent on this team. The issue is always play driving in 5-on-5. Cozens has the metrics and the pedigree and already the experience and has shown he can do it to be able to fill that need. Cozens as well, and this is from EDS, has 11 primary 5-on-5 assists, 16 total assists, which would tie Timmy Stu for first, while his 95 shots this year would rank third for the Sens. So again, you're getting a shooter that can drive the play as well and can pass the biscuit, while Josh Norris only had 1 assist on 5-on-5 through 53 games this year. Again, shout out to Everyday Sense for that stat. So just taking a look at that for a second, right away you just notice the difference in player, where both can score, but when they score is very, very much so different. Cozens can still produce on the power play, and don't worry about it. Dylan Cozens can score on the power play. He's a very solid offensive guy with a 30-goal season under his belt at the age of 24. I have no doubt he can help the Sens power play, especially with the absence now of Josh Norris. But again, on that 5-on-5 play, Cozens is going to be very integral to getting the guys going and hopefully allowing the Ottawa Senators to get a full, well-rounded 4 lines, while again helping get guys like Drake Batherson and Claude Giroux and Tkachuk and Perron and Amadio, guys in that top 9 who are not down the middle, get going, right? So, again, just taking a look at the stats here, you know, compared to Josh Norris, Dylan Cozens, again, you really see how he's a play creator and play driver. In his last 2 seasons, 49 assists, while Josh Norris just with 27. Now, Cozens has played 20 or so more games in that stretch, so a little bit more, ice time, but not by a wide margin where you're like, whoa, well, that's not really fair. I mean, unless Josh Norris was getting an assist every single game in those games he missed, Cozens clearly is the better playmaker here. So, again, this is a good thing for a guy like Drake Batherson, for example, where you're getting a guy next to him now that's going to be able to distribute the puck more efficiently in situations where otherwise Ottawa Senators have been struggling to score. And again, for Buffalo, I guess this is a good transition over to Josh Norris. For Buffalo, you're getting a guy that can put the puck in the back of the net. Josh Norris is a fantastic hockey player. And, just because Dylan Cozens brings something to this team that we desperately need, doesn't mean Josh Norris is a bad player. No, this is a tough loss for Ottawa because Josh Norris brings a lot to the table, just in different elements. He's a pure goal scorer. Primarily, he is a power play guy, though. A lot of power play points for Josh Norris. This year alone on the power play, Josh Norris has seen 1/3 of his points, that being 11, come on the power play. And of course, if you take a look at his breakout year a couple years ago where he scored 35, roughly like 23 of his 55 total points did come on the power play. So Josh Norris is a guy that will help out your power play. Watch out for that one-timer. But for a center, you do want a bit more play driving down the middle to help your wingers start producing. Cozens, I think, can do a little bit more on that compared to Josh Norris. But when it comes to pure goal scoring, I do think Josh Norris is the better goal scorer. Does that mean Dylan Cozens can't score 30 goals? No, he can't. He's done it already in the National Hockey League. It just means that Cozens might have the higher point total ceiling, but Norris probably has the higher goal total ceiling. So kind of pick your poison there. Do you want a guy that will put the puck in the back of the net and not really do much else offensively? Or, do you want a guy that could put the puck in the net, not as much, but could do a little more offensively and help other guys get going? That's going to be a very interesting debate in the comments. I can see both sides of the, of the coin there. But again, this helps make the Ottawa Senators much more well-rounded because, you got Stützle, you got Cozens, you got Pinto down the middle, all three of which can win faceoffs. I mean, Cozens, I didn't even mention this, 51% roughly faceoff rating, while Norris had 53, so not much of a hit on the faceoff side of things either. But the possession numbers, the playmaking abilities, I mean, and most of all of the injury history, there's not really any for Dylan Cozens. He's a right-handed center as well, and Giordano pointed that out on Trade Center on TSN. That's also very valuable. So I think Cozens brings a lot to the table that the Ottawa Senators were lacking. Well, again, for Josh Norris, this year, 53 games, 18-20 on ice on average per game, 33 points, 20 goals. So there you go again. Majority of his points were goals, which, hey, that's not exactly a bad thing, but you already got guys in Ottawa that could score. You need more playmaking guys down the middle to help your wingers like Batherson and whatnot get going there. Because, again, Cozens, the difference isn't that crazy. Again, Norris has a bit of a higher ceiling, but Cozens can still hit 20-plus goals easily every year, right? So, again, it's not like you're taking a massive loss in the goal department. And as well, this year, I mean, Norris, what's really impressed me with Josh Norris, if you're a Buffalo fan watching this, is his physical side of his play and the 200-foot development of his game as well, where on the penalty kill this year, he's been very, very solid. He's thrown 133 hits this year as well. He's been much more physical. He's been not afraid to throw the body, and especially coming off multiple shoulder injuries, if you're a Buffalo fan, that should be very encouraging for you, no doubt. And again, you know, he's 25, so he's still relatively young, but to hit the prime of his NHL career. His contract's up for another 5 years, just like Dylan Cozens, but $1 million or so more at $7.95 million per year. So for an $8 million second line center, you do need a bit more, and I think Cozens can give you that. But again, I think you're trading two centers, right? You're trading two second line centers with very similar total projections, right, in terms of total offensive output. It's just how they're going to get that offense is going to be different and will help make this team much more well-rounded. But again, it's up to you as an individual. Do you think it doesn't really matter if your center is a playmaker and you prefer if they just can score? That's something that a lot of people would say, but personally for me, I want a guy that can do all of it because you're down the middle, you're leading that line, and Cozens certainly has the potential to be much more of a better playmaker for the long term. Again, this is not a short-term rental trade. Both these guys have 5 more years left with their teams. So this is a long-term play, and I think as Cozens plays with much better talent here in Ottawa than compared to Buffalo, for example, no offense to Buffalo, I do think that those offensive instincts and that play-driving ability should continue to develop and make him reach new heights here in Ottawa. I mean, it's possible in his first full year next year with Ottawa, he can exceed that 30-plus goal year he had with Buffalo just a couple years ago. And the last thing I'll just mention about Josh Norris briefly is his possession numbers compared to Dylan Cozens are marginally worse. And keep in mind, Dylan Cozens is playing on a team that has the longest playoff drought in the National Hockey League. They are about to miss the playoffs for 14 years. They have not been a good team at all ever since Dylan Cozens stepped foot into the National Hockey League. Well, Josh Norris has been on a team like Ottawa, which, hey, we're not cup contenders and have certainly not been playoff contenders for a few years now with Josh Norris. But the last couple of years, we were in the hunt. We were certainly a better team than Buffalo. So the fact that his possession numbers are a little lower kind of shows that, you know, Cozens has that possession ability and play driving ability as well. Now, I'll talk about the other players attached to this trade. Firstly, Jacob Bernard-Docker. This one hurts for me personally because he's a friend of the show. He's an absolute beauty, and it always sucks to see a guy that's taking time out of his day to join your show, build a relationship, and just overall be a really nice guy. See him go, oh, he sucks. But I'm also very happy for Jacob Bernard-Docker because this is going to give JBD a real opportunity to finally get NHL minutes, which he so desperately deserves. He just wasn't going to get that here in Ottawa for whatever reason, and I do wish him the best there in Buffalo. This year for Ottawa, Jacob Bernard-Docker has played in 25 games, averaging just over 13 minutes of ice time, getting 4 total points, including a goal. Watch out for him on the right side of the blue line. He led the National Hockey League in goals from that side last year. 21 hits as well and 25 blocks. So averaging basically a hit and block per game. In his NHL career, 129 games, 5 goals, 20 total points for 113 hits and 212 blocks. So this is your prototypical two-way guy who, you know, can chip in offensively here and there. He's not an offensive play driver, but he's got a good first pass. He definitely can handle his own on the third pairing. You shouldn't be worried about him being a defensive black hole by any means. He's not an overly physical player, but he can definitely bring the boom when necessary. He does like to play physical. When he joined our show, for example, he spoke about how he wants to bring that more into his game. So with more opportunity, you definitely will see more of a physical side of things for Jacob Bernard-Docker. But again, this is a guy who I think with more opportunity can produce a little bit more offensively and be a very solid back-end depth defensive defenseman, probably in the 5 to 6 range. And again, you know, to see him get an opportunity there with Buffalo, he's a very cheap contract. He's very young, former first-round pick. I like that for Buffalo quite a bit. Again, you're getting a guy like Norris, 30-plus goal scorer, on track to do that again this year. And you're getting a guy like Jacob Bernard-Docker, who, again, has another year on his deal, on a cheap deal at that. He's also young, so he could definitely grow with the Buffalo Sabres, while Ottawa gets a guy like Dennis Gilbert, a free agent at the end of this year, so a bit of a rental here for the Ottawa Senators, unless they elect to re-sign him in the offseason, which, hey, you never know. I mean, he's making like basically league minimum, so it's not like he would cost a lot. But this is a guy that steps in and brings a bit of physicality, a little bit of grit. He certainly will be that guy, as I already said at the beginning of the video, that will fight. He's not afraid to drop him. He literally fought Brady Tkachuk earlier this year, so he's certainly a guy that brings some grit, tenacity, and fighting pedigree to that blue line, which we all know the Ottawa Senators have wanted to bring to this team in general, but as well on that blue line for some time. This year with Buffalo, also 25 games. So again, Jacob Bernard-Docker was a right-handed guy, so you do lose that versatility, while Gilbert is a left-handed guy. But they are very similar. Again, 25 games this year, just above 10 minutes of ice time on average, 5 points, 52 hits. So again, way more hits than JBD in those games. 2 hits per game on average, 29 blocks. So in terms of the physicality and that side of things, Dennis Gilbert is certainly the better player than Jacob Bernard-Docker, while JBD, in more of an opportunity in Buffalo, will be able to showcase those two-way abilities. Again, very good first pass there for JBD, a guy that can definitely move that puck. While Gilbert, again, is more of a guy that's going to be a rock on the blue line. On a pairing potentially there with Tyler Clevin, we'll see what happens with that. Maybe he's the 7th defenseman behind Manapalo or Hamonic. We'll have to see with that. But what I will say is, again, this is a guy that's going to bring the boom, bring some physicality, and bring something to that blue line that we really don't have. We don't have really any physicality from that blue line. So in that aspect, I do like that for the Ottawa Senators, especially, again, if JBD was not in the long-term plans for the Ottawa Senators. So with that, let me know what you think in the comment section down below about this trade. I mean, an absolute blockbuster, a whirl of emotions. I mean, at first I hated it. Now I'm coming around to it. I just think, again, it's a bit of a risk mid-season. I do think Cozens has the tools to fit right into the Ottawa Senators system and not miss a step. But again, when you're trading a guy like Josh Norris, a locker room favorite, that definitely always has some risk. So again, best of luck to Josh Norris in front of the show, Jacob Bernard-Docker in Buffalo. You deeply will be missed. I mean, again, it's crazy. I mean, an OG guy, an OG piece of the core, gone just like that. And eventually that was going to happen when you don't make the playoffs for so many years. One of these guys were going to go. And there it is. It's Josh Norris. So again, best of luck to Josh Norris and Jacob Bernard-Docker. Happy to see him get an opportunity there in Buffalo. And welcome to Ottawa, Dylan Cozens, the workhorse from Whitehorse, and Dennis Gilbert. Again, let me know what you think in the comment section down below as always. I'll see you all soon. Go Sens, go.
Sens, go, go, Sens, go, go, Sens, go.